Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Nulty Breakfast Club. We'll be starting in just a minute here. So again, welcome everybody. This is the Nulty Breakfast Club. If this is the seminar you signed up for, you're at the right place. If it's not, you're still going to like it. Right, Angie?
You got it. Exciting stuff.
It's insurance. It has to be exciting. All right. So I've got us just a few seconds, almost 9:01. So we'll go ahead and get started here. This is the Nulty Breakfast Club. I think it's our 4th of 6 this spring, or 5th of 6, or 5 of 7. It's something. We're somewhere along the line, and we welcome you. We're glad you're here. We're doing Certificates of Insurance 101 today. It's one we've never done before. We will have you out of here by 9:15. That's a promise. I am Tom Jager. I'm the Commercial Lines team leader here at Nulty, and I'm joined in her debut appearance today by Angie. Angie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Angie Trepanier. I'm a Commercial Lines account executive here, and I've probably been with Nulty, about 22, 23 years.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
That's a long time. You must love insurance.
Love it.
So yeah, Angie's this first time that she's been able to lead a seminar with us, so we're really excited. The hard part about doing a seminar virtually, and someday we'll be doing them in person again, not too long in the future, I suspect, but the hard part is not getting feedback to us, so we don't really know what the audience is doing. In the past, for Nulty Breakfast Club, we give away a gift certificate to some lucky random person. I'd like to change that up today and make it the person that asks the best questions in the Q&A box. Whoever asks the best question gets a breakfast of their choice given to them from Nulty Insurance. So ask a question, you might be a winner. If no one asks any questions, then I'd be sad and I will keep the breakfast for myself. So no, hopefully you asked. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and dive into Insurance Certificates 101.
Okay, we're going to do this kind of like a Q&A. So I am going to be the read the questions out, and Tom is going to answer all of our questions. So here we go. Do you seriously consider the lowly, humble, often overlooked insurance certificate to be the key to economic growth?
And the answer is yes, absolutely, I do. Insurance is a foundational part of our economy. Every project that we do, there's building projects going on all over Kalamazoo. They all start with insurance certificates to get these contractors on the job. If you're making a product, you have to prove that you have product liability coverage, and you use an insurance certificate to show that, so that people buy your product because they know that it's safe and there's insurance backing it. Shoot, you go to the farmer's market this weekend to pick up produce, the little booth there, those people have insurance to prove that if something happens, they're covered. So it's a foundational risk transfer method that we use, and allows risk transfer, risk sharing. That allows banks to take risks out of business. It allows owners to take the risk of building a new building. It really is a foundational element. I know it's not the most fun one, but it is a foundational element to everything that we do. So insurance certificates are a really important part of the process.
Well said, Tom.
Thank you, Angie.
Okay, I have to admit, you have my attention, but let's start at the beginning. What is an insurance certificate?
So as it says there, simply put, it's a snapshot showing that an entity's existing liability insurance coverage at a moment in time. So when you get an insurance certificate, there's a date up in the upper right-hand corner. It shows various policies, coverage limits, dates, and so forth. It shows at that moment that the insurance agent issued it, that coverage existed at that time. It's used to show that coverage exists. It's used to show that coverage existed at one point in the past. It's used to show those particular limits and dates of coverage. It's a way of providing essential, basic, but essential information about an entity's insurance so that those relying on them know that they have proper coverage in place. Typically, and what we're going to talk about today is the Accord 25 form. That's the one that we issue literally, seriously, hundreds of thousands of these a year from Nulty Insurance because it's such an integral part of our contractors, but also our non-contracting accounts too. Typically, it shows information on the general liability, the auto liability, the work comp employer's liability, and often umbrella coverage on there. There can be more, but those are the 4 that are typically seen on there.
So I think I'm starting to get it, Tom. You're doing such a good job at explaining it.
Did you fade off there for a minute, Angie?
So are you telling me that an insurance certificate is an insurance policy?
No, sorry, that's not right. They're not an insurance policy. It's just a document that shows that those coverage items were in place at a point in time. It's used, again, as evidence that it existed, but it's not a policy. A certificate is not a contract. An insurance policy itself is a contract. You're buying insurance, so you're paying the insurance company money, and in exchange, they've agreed to take on risks according to the policy language. That's a contract. This one is not a contract. It's just in no way does a certificate change the contract that actually exists. It just shows that it does exist.
Okay, so the certificate is not a policy. Got that.
Yep.
But it does provide insurance coverage for the certificate holder, right?
No, not really. It shows that that coverage exists, but it doesn't actually provide any coverage because it's not the contract. It's not part of the contract. It's just showing something that exists.
What is a certificate holder? Maybe we should back up a little bit. What is a certificate holder?
That's a good question. A certificate holder is someone that asked to be a certificate holder, essentially. They said, let's make it Angie Incorporated. You're a carpentry contractor, okay? They said to Angie Incorporated, hey, Angie, I want you on this job, but I'd like you to show me that you have insurance. So you cause your insurance agent to issue a certificate in favor of me, Tom Jager. And it says on the bottom left-hand corner, Tom Jager. I received this certificate showing that Angie had these coverages in place at the time that certificate was issued. All it is for informational purposes to tell me that coverage does exist, makes me feel better that Angie Inc. has some coverage. So maybe it'd be helpful if we look at what an actual certificate looks like. And we're going to drill down. You can see copies of insurance certificates on your screen there. We're going to drill down on those highlighted items on the next 3 screens. They will help us to see this. And because quite honestly, most people don't read any of this. We look right through it and completely miss it. So this is the top thing. The thing you're going to see up in the upper right-hand corner is the date. That's usually filled in. Well, it is filled in. The date, that shows the date the certificate was actually issued. But this language at the top is really important to tell what this is and is not. So this certificate is issued as a matter of information only. Simply information. Confers no rights upon the certificate holder, that person in the lower left-hand corner that's listed, that's receiving this. This certificate does not affirmatively or negatively amend, extend, or alter the coverage afforded by the policies. So nothing on a certificate can change the coverage that's in the policy. It's not allowed by the certificate, and frankly, it's not allowed by law. So if you say to, and we get this sent to us sometimes, hey, use a certificate to change my coverage, or we need you to change the coverage, give us a new certificate showing that you've changed the coverage. Well, we can give you a new certificate, but to change the coverage, we have to change the policy. We can't just change it on the certificate. That doesn't mean anything. So continuing on there, this certificate of insurance, so we're on the second to last sentence here, does not constitute a contract. We just talked about that. This is not a contract between the issuing insurers. So there's could be various insurance companies listed on the certificate. Authorized representative, that's us as the agent or the producer, either one, and the certificate holder. Again, in no way is this a contract between us. We're not promising you anything in the certificate. We might be promising the certificate holder something in the policy itself, but not in the certificate. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me, Tom.
Does it make sense to you? That people ask questions. So far, I think that gift certificate is still up for grabs. So if no one asks again, I'll just ask myself some questions at some point and then I'll win. Okay, so that's the first thing. The next thing right below it is this information on the certificate.
Hey, Tom, we actually did have a question. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Tell me the question.
So here's a question for you.
Yeah.
So Julie Calloway asks, so you could potentially receive a certificate of insurance and the company could cancel the policies the next day?
Yes. Yes, that's a good question, Julie. Yeah, the certificate is that moment in time. It's a snapshot showing the coverage is in place. They could cancel it right away, and you probably, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, would not know that. In the lower right-hand corner of the certificate, it says that we will notify the certificate holder if the policy is canceled according to the policy provisions. Well, what's the policy provisions? If you look through the standard unendorsed policy, there are no provisions, meaning they will not notify you. It takes some extra special wording to get them to notify you in case of cancellation. So we'll follow up on that a little bit more, but a really good question. I like it. This part right here is the next part under the first part that we read. So this is the next highlighted thing. If a certificate holder is an additional insured, and everybody wants to be named additional insured these days. When I started in this business, no one was additional insured. Now everybody's an additional insured, and that's okay. It's just, that's the way the world has evolved in our risk transfer and our approach to it. If the certificate holder is an additional insured, the policies must have additional insured provisions or be endorsed. In other words, us just saying on a certificate that Angie Inc. has named Tom as additional insured means nothing if the policy doesn't support that and if there's not a contract, and we're going to talk about that more too. If subrogation is waived, so we'll define in a little bit, we will define these terms in a little more detail. If subrogation is waived, subject to terms and conditions of the policy, certain policies may require an endorsement. So additional insured basically always requires an endorsement. Some policies have waiver of subrogation built in, and some require an endorsement to have that. A statement on this certificate does not confer rights to the certificate holder in lieu of such endorsements. That's why we're really careful about what we put on the certificate. We don't want it to try to lead anyone to believe that the coverage is broader than what it is. The policy stands by itself, really. The certificate is just a picture of what we are presenting that the policy actually has in it. So.
Hey, Tom, we have another question.
Oh, good.
We just had somebody ask what accord is, because we refer to everything on an accord form. So can you just kind of explain what accord means?
As far as I know, Yeah, as far as I know, Accord's the company that sends those certificates that we can print on. So
That's it.
that's about all I know, is that the insurance industry has agreed that Accord made some dandy forms and we're going to follow them and use them. So,
And it has nothing to do with the Honda Accord.
It does not have to do with a Honda Accord. Another great question.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah. So sorry, I couldn't get a better answer than that. That you stumped him. That might be a winning question because you stumped me.
Might be.
So,
yay, Kyle.
Yeah. So this is just reminding you. So on the certificate of insurance, you'll see these two columns here. One says additional insured, and boxes can be checked here. And one says waiver of subrogation or subrogation waiver, and boxes can be checked here. So usually if that box is checked on additional insured under the general liability, that means we've named that certificate holder as an additional insured, potentially. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So you can name additional insureds on all of these except workers' compensation. You can never name somebody else as an additional insured on a workers' compensation policy.
And we have had people try. So
we've had people try, yes. And you can't do it. And part of the reason you can't do that is you would be extending your coverage to their employees when they're injured that have nothing to do with you. So you can't do that. You can waive subrogation, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. So, all right.
Tom, I think it would be super fun for me and the audience if we could talk about insurance terms and what the terms mean. Can we please do that?
Okay, since you asked, yes, we can. And to make it even more fun, we'll go from bottom to top on this screen, just to lighten things up. So we talked a little bit earlier about in that lower right-hand corner where it says on the certificate that we will notify you in conjunction with the policy provisions if this policy is canceled. And what we talked about at the time was that means they won't notify you because there's no policy provisions to talk about how they were going to notify you. When you add the 30-day notice of cancellation, that actually adds policy provisions that does obligate the insurance company to notify you if the policy is canceled, either canceled due to non-pay or canceled due to the insured deciding they don't want the coverage anymore, or the insurance company canceling it. Any of those could trigger that. So that 30-day notice of cancellation will actually trigger some action that lets you know that the policy is canceled. Am I right about that, Angie?
You are, and I just wanted to jump in and say that that is not something that's normally on a policy. So when we see that in a contract, we actually have to request an endorsement to your policy with the carrier. So.
Yeah, so that's one of those things that we can't get blanket 30-day notice of cancellation for all certificate holders. We have to do it individually, and a lot of the carriers will charge a nominal amount to make that happen because they know that at the time of a cancellation, they have to, figure out who all those people were and send them notice that it canceled. So per project aggregate. Per project aggregate is something that really nice for an owner or a general contractor. What it says is that certificate of insurance has a limit for any one claim, and it has an aggregate limit. So I issue a certificate on January 1 that says that these limits are available. That doesn't mean that on May, 28 today, whatever day it is, that the full aggregate's still available. There might have been claims paid out of that policy. And so the actual limit of liability coverage available might be less now. What the per project does is it gives me as an owner of a project confidence that those full limits are available for my project. And I don't have to share it with anybody else's project or any other losses that that particular contractor might have had. So blanket additional insured, this is something we use for almost all of our contractors whenever we can. What it basically says is all those owners, general contractors that have contracts with you as the contractor that require you to name them additional insured are automatic. We don't have to go through each one. Automatically, they will be additional insured, subject to a contract in place making that happen. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Am I clear on that one, Angie?
I have a couple questions, Tom. You want to jump in?
Yep.
I had someone ask, does it change your insurance rates by the number of certificates that you have issued? So if you have a company that, or an insured that has just, say, 5 certificates a year versus somebody who has 5,000, does that make a difference with your premium?
No, that in and of itself does not make any difference. Probably the fact that you're doing 5,000 different projects means you've got quite a bit of payroll developed and all the associated costs that go with that. But the certificates themselves, we don't charge anything for a certificate. Good
Okay,
question.
and we have one more question too. Can you add alternate employer endorsement on work comp instead of additional insured?
Yes, you can. We resist that somewhat, but yes, that is a way of getting there. Usually you have to have a pretty good explanation for it, and some of our underwriters don't really care for it all that much.
That was one of our employees that asked, so that was an assurance question.
You're trying to stump me? That person is now paying for the gift certificate.
Michelle Hills.
Michelle, bad person, bad person.
Okay.
So primary non-contributory, it's a way of making sure that when the owner says to Angie Inc., I want to be blanket additional insured, and I want your language to be primary and non-contributory Angie Inc. What that says is Angie's coverage is going to be first. It's going to name me additional insured, so it's going to help me as the owner, and I am not going to contribute in any way to this loss. So it's all on Angie. You can start seeing that what happens is the owner shifts liability to the general contractor, and then the general contractor will try and shift it down to the subcontractors. The lowest sub is usually the one that gets stuck with everything. Just how it works in our world. Waiver of subrogation is a promise prior to a loss that we won't try and collect against an at-fault party. So let's go to back to Angie Inc. Angie Inc. signs a contract to work for XYZ Incorporated. So XYZ says to Angie, we want waiver of subrogation on your work comp policy. Angie says, done. That's in the contract with Angie Inc. and XYZ. She's told her insurance company about it. It's all good. Angie's employee gets injured, and she ends up paying a big work comp claim, $100,000. She says, well, that injury was actually caused by XYZ. XYZ, pay me back for that. And they're going to say, nope, you've agreed beforehand to waive your right to collect back against me. You can't do it, and you also agreed that your insurance company can't do it. So you've waived that right. The downside of that is that, Angie, you're going to pay the claim, which will probably increase your work comp rates in the future and increase your experience mod in the future. But that's part of the deal to get the job. You had to waive the subrogation beforehand. So again, the owner doesn't want to be responsible, or the general contractor, however it works. So additional insured, our last one of the definitions. The additional insured is a provision in the policy that extends the liability coverage to others. This means the additional insured is provided a level of protection in the policy. Let's give a claim example. A subcontractor named the owner as additional insured on the sub's policy. While working on the job, one of the sub's employees causes injury to a pedestrian. Pedestrian sues, but who's the pedestrian going to sue? They're going to sue the subcontractor, and they're also probably going to sue the owner for negligent job management. So it's both of their fault. In this case, the sub says, hey, owner, we're both getting sued. The owner's going to go back to the sub and say, hey, by contract, you agreed to name me additional insured. Because you did, and you gave me waiver of subrogation, primary non-contributory, go ahead and defend me on this claim. Make sure it goes away, pay the settlement, all that kind of stuff. So again, your company is going to stand in because you've named them additional insured. The key to this whole thing is that the additional insured provision is only triggered if there is a written contract between the general contractor in this case and the sub, or between the owner and the sub. There has to be a written contract that triggers that. Outside of a written contract, nothing happens. Had one of these recently where the owner came back to our subcontractor and said, hey, your employee is suing us. Need you to go ahead and defend us on this thing based on the additional insured on your certificate of insurance. And so it turns into, claim gets turned into the insurance company and they say, okay, that's great. Send us a copy of the contract for the job. There's no contract for the job. They never signed a contract. So at that point, the additional insured goes away because the additional insured is only there in support of a contract that requires it. Just saying I want to be additional insured doesn't mean anything unless there's a contract in place. Does that make sense?
Hey, Tom, there is a question.
Yep.
Kind of going back to the 30-day notice of cancellation.
Yep.
We had a question that when you receive an insurance certificate, can you call the agency that issued it and ask if the coverage is still, even if it's a couple days later, if the coverage is still in force? Is that private information or is that something that we are able to give that information to those people?
Yeah, you can give that information. I think it's fair enough. Or you can say to them, hey, I have reason to be concerned. Please issue me an updated certificate of insurance. And, we'll never issue a different, and other agents won't either. We'll never issue a certificate of insurance for coverage that's not there. That is not great in our world, results in loss of license, loss of job, lots of problems. So it's perfectly fine. If you have some reason to think something went wrong and their insurance isn't still in place, yeah, it's perfectly fine to call and ask for an update. So let's give a claim example that kind of weaves some of this together and get you a little bit better idea. So Angie, in this example, I work for you, Angie Inc. Angie's a carpentry contractor. I'm a lowly carpenter. Because of the labor shortage, I'm the best you could find, which is not going to be great, but that's what it is. So you signed a contract with a general contractor. We'll call it Stengel Inc. Stengel Inc. is the general contractor. So the contract requires some special wording in it. You have to name Stengel Inc. additional insured. You have to waive subrogation from Stengel Inc. You give him the whole enchilada of things that he wants. I am injured on the job as a result of carelessness by Stengel Inc. employees. So I'm injured. It's a bad injury. It's a $100,000 claim, just like we talked about the last one. So I have lost wages. I have medical bills. I got lots of problems. And it's, like I said, a big work comp claim. The cost of that claim is going to negatively affect you, Angie Inc., on additional premiums in the future and a higher experience mod, both bad things. Nothing you can do about it because you waive subrogation. You can't go back to Stengel Inc. and collect back for that work comp. So that's bad. It's about to get worse. I feel that my work comp didn't fully make me whole, and I'm still mad at Stengel Inc., so I decide to sue them. I sue Stengel Inc., and I say, I want more money because I've lost life's enjoyment. I still can't do the work that I used to be able to do. My future doesn't look bright anymore, blah, blah, blah. So I sue Stengel Inc. And you're feeling pretty good about it because Stengel already stuck you with a work comp claim. You're like, ha, Stengel, here, you get to pay now. But Stengel Inc. comes smiling into you and says, hey, Angie Inc., got a bad news for you. Remember, you named me additional insured on your general liability policy. You gave me waiver of subrogation. You made primary non-contributory, all of that kind of stuff. Because of that, this lawsuit from Tom against me, you are going to defend me for, and if there's any settlement with Tom, you're going to pay it. So now you, Angie Inc., got stuck on the work comp side of this and on the liability side of this. Ouch. So what I'm trying to tell you is, as contractors, especially as subs, there's going to be wording in these contracts. You have to watch out for them. You have to make sure that you're good with them. They're going to put liability on you that you might not otherwise have had. That's a cost of doing business, probably in today's environment, but sometimes you can negotiate some of that stuff out of there. Just things to think about. Any other questions at this point, Angie?
Let me check real quick. No, it looks like we are good. We're
Okay.
good.
All right. Next slide then.
Does additional insured apply if no written contract?
Simple answer is absolutely no. So we can issue a certificate of insurance that says additional insured on it all day long, and it does not make that certificate holder an additional insured if there's not a contract between the insured and that certificate holder. Has to be a contract. Has to be a contract that they can produce and show to the adjuster at the time of a claim. If there is no contract, there is no additional insured.
But what if there's a blanket additional insured?
Blanket additional insured is nice. So there is two different times you can name a specific additional insured. So if I'm a contractor that never again is going to name anybody additional insured, I might be fine with just getting a specific additional insured. But if I'm a contractor, like most of ours these days, have to name additional insureds all the time, use it on a blanket basis, means it covers all of them without specifically listing them. But the blanket additional insured doesn't mean anything. A certificate of insurance doesn't mean anything unless there's a written contract requiring this to happen. So.
Okay, here's a question. What if there is a written contract requiring additional insured, but there's no certificate issued?
So in this case, written contract requiring additional insured, but we didn't actually issue a certificate showing additional insured. If the policy has blanket additional insured on it, we don't have to have issued a certificate to make that happen. Again, certificate doesn't change anything. It's all in the policy and the contract. So the fact that we didn't issue a certificate doesn't mean anything. If the policy doesn't contain blanket additional insured in this case, then you got a problem because there is no additional insured built into the policy. So the contract is asking for it, requiring it, but it's never been built into the policy. Does that make sense? Yeah, just remind you, certificate doesn't change anything. It's a snapshot of coverage. The policy controls and it responds to the contract.
Okay, can we talk a little bit about our approach, Nulty's approach to certificates of insurance, how we handle things?
Yes, I'll try, but you can feel free to interrupt me at any time. But
Gotcha.
So generally, there's a description in the lower part of the certificate, and a lot of times we're pressured to write some particular words in that certificate box there. That's not really right, because they're trying to have us add to what the policy says. The policy's in control. So rather than do that, we want to leave that blank and just refer to the policy forms which we attach to the certificate. So these days, almost all of our certificates are emailed out. And they're emailed out with the attachments. And we'll show you that, and we'll send you the slide deck that gives you an example of what that actually looks like, what the customer is, or the certificate holder is actually receiving. So if the client requests additional insured waiver of subrogation, we attach the form, place the excess in the appropriate box, and send it out, but we don't add into the description. Am I right about this, Angie?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We had some questions come in, so I'm trying to read and listen at the same time. We have a question. that says the policy that we take out, let's see, let me reread it. To clarify, our policy that we take out may or may not contain a blanket additional insured. And how do we check that? Is it on our COI?
It's not going to say that probably on your COI. You can check that by calling us if we're your agent, or whoever your agent is can tell you whether you have blanket additional insured on there. We usually, again, we try and do it on every customer we possibly can if the underwriter will agree to it. It's usually not a big deal in terms of premium to do that, and it takes care of that problem where what if we don't issue the certificate the way you want and you're required to have it by contract. It takes care of that problem for you. We also try and remind you when we do proposals, oftentimes we put that we've put blanket additional insured on there and so forth.
Okay.
Other questions?
There are, but I think I'm going to ask you that in maybe the next section. So.
Okay.
Okay, actually, here is one.
Okay.
It says, a lot of times I receive a certificate of insurance from subcontractors and the agent does not include the endorsements, even though the boxes for additional insured and waiver of subrogation are checked. Does that affect us as the certificate holder?
Yeah, it certainly could, because they've not really proved that you are actually additional insured because they haven't given you the language out of the policy. Us checking a box saying that you're additional insured, if the policy hasn't been endorsed to include that, it means nothing. And quite honestly, we can't even be held accountable for it. It's embarrassing as professionals. So we don't want that to ever happen, but there's nothing anybody would do to us for that. We're giving you a piece of paper. It's not accurately representing what the policy is. If we didn't do that, if we did it on purpose, that'd be a whole different thing. But if we did it accidentally, there's not much to be done about it. So yeah, I would go back to that agent and say, I want the policy language. And you'll see in a minute how we do that, where we actually send it along with the appropriate areas, because obviously a policy is huge, right? So we send the pages that matter highlighted for them to draw their eyes to the places that do matter.
Okay. What are some things a subcontractor should worry about?
Finding help, increased cost of materials. There's a whole lot of things. But as far as insurance, as far as insurance, yes. Watch for your contracts, what limits they're asking you to have. Do they want to be named additional insured, waiver, subrogation, any special wording in there? Make sure your policy, as we talked about, contains blanket additional insured. The other thing we're seeing more often than we used to by far is requirements for things like pollution liability, cyber liability, even employment practices liability. We're seeing, I had one the other day that asked for crime coverage on it. So you have to watch for these other things that they're suddenly throwing in there that what they want you to have coverage for. Cyber is getting very popular, especially for some of the trades.
And there's a good question that talks about this. So it says, if we need assistance with creating a subcontractor agreement / contract, does Nulty provide assistance with reviewing those documents to make sure we are covered from an insurance standpoint with our subs?
Yes, we can help you actually with some templates that can be used to create your own contract, and they're actually fairly easy to use. They're developed by insurance companies. They know exactly what they want to see in these contracts, so they're really done well, and they're pretty easy to use the time for our contractors. So you can always send those to us to look over. We limit our view to the insurance section of the contract, so we don't review everything, but that's the parts we look at. So, all right. Next slide.
Okay, so somebody changed the slides on me a little bit here, but I'm just going to read what it says. Tom, you are doing an amazing job so far. What are some things a general contractor or owner should think about?
First of all, Angie, it's okay to own up to the fact that you really think that. That's okay.
I do, but
everybody's with you on this. So this kind of goes back to actually the last question. Do you have a written contract with your subs? Does the contract require additional insured and other items? Again, we can help you develop that. And then as a general contractor too, you got to make sure you get certificates of insurance from your subs that comply with your contractual requirements. Does it have the additional insured and the language that we want to see? Does it meet the limits that you're requesting, coverage dates you're requesting? You need this for fundamental risk transfer. You also need it for audits to show that they were not your employees, but they were working for someone else at the time of the job. So we are really coming up on time here, and we are very strict about getting you out on time. We will be sending you this slide deck. This final part in the slide deck is really just a sample certificate of insurance. So here's just a basic certificate of insurance and what it looks like. And then it shows the additional wording that we'll send. So this is what an actual certificate that we sent out looks like. So it'll have all these different pages. And as I said, highlighted to draw your eyes to the things that matter, that support that contract that our subcontractor signed with the owner or the general contractor. So it's just several pages of that. These tend to be, like I said, they tend to get a little bit longer, but we try and keep it just to the pages that matter. So other questions, Angie? Anything else out there?
No more questions. I just want to comment a little bit on certificates and how we handle things. At Nulty, we tried, if we get a request for a certificate of insurance, we try to respond to that as quickly as we can, but we definitely do it same day. We have a specific email address, which is certs@nulty.com. That goes to our lovely Caitlin Stengel, and she is mostly responsible for responding to some of those certificates. You know, we understand how important it is. You have to get, you have to have your certificate on file in order to get on a job site or, you know, manufacturing plant if you're doing work on their site. We understand how important those are. So we do our best to try to make sure that you're compliant. I know a lot of companies now are using like certificates companies, and you know, you have to upload to their sites, and it's difficult. It's very difficult. A lot of people ask us for things to put on a certificate that we just can't do. But so we do push back sometimes because we want to do it right. But we also understand we're taking care of our clients, and we're trying to make their job easier. And so that's just kind of what we do. We issue thousands of certificates a day, so we get it, but we do sometimes have to push back on people because they ask us for things to do that we just can't do. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Perfect. So any other questions in that have arrived, or are we all caught up?
I think we are all caught up.
All right, so we have to have a winner of our contest. First of all, thank you so much. It made it so much more fun for me that we had so many great questions. So I'm going to make a judgment call and award the win to the person that asked the Accord question that I totally fumbled. So we're going to get you a gift certificate to the breakfast spot of your choice. Others that ask questions, if they have a disagreement with my judgment, I am willing to consider your disagreement. Send me an email. You can probably talk me into a breakfast as well. So I appreciate everybody joining us today. Watch for news about our next seminar coming up in a few weeks from now. Contact us anytime we can help. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, guys.